Hello, my name's Andrew Leech. I work for a company called Fleet Evolution, who's salary sacrifice specialists, and I'm the sales director there. Okay, car salary sacrifice in essence allows an employee to give up or sacrifice, if you want to use a rather aggressive word, or exchange part of their salary in exchange for a company benefit, which in this case is the use of a car for a period of time. As the financial advantages of car salary sacrifice, as with most salary sacrifice arrangements for the employer, tend to centre around the NI saving. So you reduce somebody's payroll down, there's a corresponding saving in employer's NI. And in schemes, traditionally an employer will choose to pass some or all of that back to an employee, but there is a saving initially. There are some savings which are less easy to quantify for an employer. So traditionally it's a type of benefit which won't be offered by your competitors because it's a growing benefit, but it's still fairly unknown on the benefit portfolio. So increases in the type of candidate you attract, or better quality candidates that you attract. An increase in retention. We've definitely seen in our organisation an increase in retention. And also the ability to meet your duty of care. So if you're giving these vehicles to people who are driving on company business, it will meet their duty of care, or meet your duty of care as an employer, which reduces your administrative burden to the organisation, plus just ensures best practice. From an employee's perspective, the advantages all centre around the tax and NI saving that an employee can achieve, and that's all kind of offset against the CO2 of a car, because it is a company car, so it is subject to company car tax under P11D. The more polluting the car, the higher the company car tax will be to the individual, and therefore the lower the saving they will make. But typically an employee can save anything from 45% on some of the newer electric and electric hybrid vehicles compared to retail costs, down to about 20% on some of the larger executive, still more polluting vehicles. In order to evaluate if car salary sacrifice will work for you, you've got to make sure that there's a couple of factors in play. The first factor would be retention. An employee tends to move company every 2.5 years. A car salary sacrifice scheme tends to last, for a typical employee, about 3 years. And although there's safeguards in place, you do need to make sure you've got good retention in a business. A general figure we advise people is about 80% retention year on year in the part of the workforce where you're looking to put a scheme in. The second thing you need to look at is how open the workforce are, or the employee base are, to flexible benefits. We have, for example, at Fleet Evolution, 2 customers in a very similar marketplace. They're virtually identical businesses, but one company, the scheme isn't particularly well adopted. The other company, in the first year, with an adoption rate of about 15%. And if you track it back and look at other flexible benefits, you can see even with their pension, the pension with a company that didn't really get on top and get on board with salary sacrifice cars, a lot of their employees have opted out of pensions and don't want to take that particular benefit, even though it's very generous for them. And we see pensions as a real good indicator. If your employees are engaged with the other benefits you offer, they trust you as an employer, and they believe you're acting in their best interests, and salary sacrifice cars can really work for you and for your employees as an employer there. And the third indicator, the third stat you need to look at, is the pay and remuneration around your workforce. We're not talking here about a £30 a month mobile phone contract, we're talking about a £300-400 car potentially. And you need to make sure you've got enough salary in your employee base, bearing in mind that salary sacrifice cars are usually the second or third option that people salary sacrifice for, to support that sacrifice, keeping them well clear of minimum wage guidelines. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that you don't need to offer this benefit to every single employee in your organisation. So, for example, again, we have customers where they may employ 800 people, but only 80 may be eligible for this specific benefit. So it's important to tailor it to the right part of your workforce if you do want to introduce it. To mitigate the risk around any salary sacrifice arrangement, you need to be aware what your largest risks are. And in the case of any salary sacrifice arrangements, you have significant risks around paternity and maternity, especially paternity with the changes in legislation coming online. So if people take childcare vouchers, for argument's sake, you have to consider how that cost can be met by the organisation if somebody goes off on maternity or paternity, and it's exactly the same for a salary sacrifice car. You should choose a partner that will help you through that particular risk, however, because instead of looking at a £250 childcare voucher contribution, you could be looking at, like I say, a £400 car contribution, or potentially even more. So it's important to seek out a partner that will protect you against that particular risk. The other risk, and the more obvious one, is the early termination. So again, car salary sacrifice will vary from other salary sacrifice arrangements in that it would tend to be a longer term arrangement, so typically about 3 years. Your typical employee, according to our research, tends to jump ship every 28 months. So you can see there may be an exposure to the organisation if you offer people salary sacrifice cars. So again, when you are working with a provider, then work with that provider, first of all, to only introduce the benefit to a part of your employee base where you either have good retention or the ability to create good retention. And secondly, work with a provider that will provide you insurance, so that if an employee leaves the business, they either have to take the vehicle with them personally, or if it ends up being your problem, you can make it the scheme provider's problem and simply give that vehicle back. And most schemes you'll tend to find have that form of insurance, some such as ours, pretty much with no kind of deferral period should the employee leave subject to conditions. The future for car salary sacrifice we see is extremely bright. If we look at all of the guidance coming out from the government, and if we look at how manufacturers are getting behind this particular marketplace and how employers are introducing it as part of their portfolio, all the signals are that car salary sacrifice is going to grow, and grow significantly. If I elaborate on some of the facts and stats behind that, if we look at company cars in 2007, the average company car in 2007 emitted, I think, about 168 CO2, and the benefit in kind tax on that was 23%. If we look at cars last year, the typical company car is emitting closer to 120 CO2, and the benefit in kind tax is around 21%. So actually, salary sacrifice cars, which are so dependent on that benefit in kind charge to remain advantageous, are becoming more and more affordable and cheaper for your employees. If we look at more innovative products recently, we have electric cars which were introduced a few years ago. So 5 years ago, I guess something like the Toyota Prius was the weapon of choice, if you'll pardon the expression, for salary sacrifice, whereas now we have Nissan Leafs. We have a lot of Nissan Leafs on our fleet, Renault products, various other products. And in the last few months, we've had some very, very innovative hybrid products coming out. So we've taken our first BMW i8 and i3 orders, for example. There's a new Mitsubishi 4x4 King there, which falls into that portfolio. We have cars, if you really are a kind of petrol head, if you like, which don't use any petrol. Driving in today, I was overtaken by a Tesla, a supercar Tesla, which allegedly does 250 miles on a battery charge. And there's some fantastic products coming out at the ultra low end of a CO2 spectrum, which is going to support salary sacrifice. But for your mainstream product, Ford have brought out EcoBoost technology, dramatically reducing the CO2 of their engines. VW long ago brought out Blue Motion, which is dramatically driving that down. And right across the portfolio, where people used to choose high polluting vehicles with significantly high petrol or diesel bills, there's now very, very low CO2 alternatives. So we see the future very, very bright. The government have published benefit in kind rates up to 2018, so we can see where they're going, and we can see where manufacturers are putting all of their effort in reducing that CO2 down. So the likelihood is salary sacrifice cars are going to get more and more cost effective as time goes on.